I never thought I'd be the guy posting something like this, but here I am. My name's Mike, and I've been with my wife, Jessica, for about 8 years now. We met in college, hit it off pretty quickly, and got married a couple of years after. For the most part, I thought we had a good thing going. We had our usual disagreements, sure, but nothing that made me suspect we were headed for disaster. But then, a few months ago, everything started to feel off. Jessica's been more distant than usual, snapping at me over small things and canceling plans at the last minute. She'd always been kind of bitchy, but this was different. It was like she was avoiding me. I'd ask her what was wrong and she'd brush it off, say I was overthinking or that she was stressed at work. Honestly, I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just overwhelmed, or maybe I was just imagining things. It got worse when I noticed her phone kept going off at odd times, and she'd quickly hide it. I'd catch her glancing at her screen when she thought I was looking, and sometimes she'd even delete messages or clear her browsing history. I was starting to get suspicious, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I decided to keep an eye on her, but I wasn't prepared for what I'd find next. Then came the day I found her leaving the house late at night, looking guilty as hell. She said she was going to meet a friend from work, but I knew better. Something told me she was hiding something. I followed her a few times just to see where she was really going, and one night I finally caught her in the act. I saw her sneaking into a cheap motel with a guy I didn't recognize. I could see them through the window, they were kissing, and it looked like more than just a friendly meetup. My stomach dropped. It was like being punched in the gut. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I felt stupid for not noticing sooner, for not trusting my gut. But more than anything, I felt betrayed by my wife, Jessica, who I thought loved me, and by this guy, I guess, who I now hated with every fiber of my being. The worst part was I couldn't believe she'd do this during what should have been a solemn family moment. My grandmother had just passed away, and she was out there cheating with some guy while I was broken and crying at her funeral. That moment hit me hard, the utter disrespect, the cruelty of it all. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to think, to process what I'd seen. But I knew the truth now. Jessica had been cheating on me for a while, and she didn't care about how much it hurt me. The worst part, when I finally did confront her, she denied everything, called me paranoid, said I was imagining things, that she was just tired and stressed, and that I was overreacting. She even had the nerve to tell me I was controlling for asking where she'd been. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just cheating, she was a bitch about it, lying and manipulating her way out of it like it was nothing. After her stubborn denial, I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak boiling inside me. I knew she was lying, but hearing her dismiss everything like it was no big deal made it worse. I couldn't believe she'd go that far, sneaking around behind my back during what should have been a time of mourning. My grandmother's funeral was supposed to be a moment for family, respect, and love. Instead, I was discovering my wife's betrayal, and she was making me doubt myself with her bullshit lies. I didn't sleep that night, replaying everything I'd seen and heard. I kept asking myself how she could be so callous. How could she betray me while I was sitting there, broken, crying my eyes out at her grandmother's funeral? It felt like she had no respect for me or our relationship. I was furious that she thought she could get away with it, that she could lie and pretend everything was fine while she was out screwing around with some guy. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just let it go. I needed to confront her properly, to get the truth out in the open. I called her at work, told her to come home. When she arrived, I was already waiting, my heart pounding. I told her I knew everything. About the affair, the sneaking around, the motel incident. Her face went pale, and for a second she looked genuinely caught off guard. But then her bitchy side kicked in. She rolled her eyes and spat out, "You're crazy, Mike. You're just jealous because I was talking to a coworker. It's nothing, I swear. You're blowing this way out of proportion. You always do." I couldn't believe her. She was lying straight to my face, looking at me like I was the problem. I told her I had proof, that I saw her sneaking out, that I knew about the motel. Her response: she said I was paranoid and that I was turning everything into some drama. She accused me of not trusting her, of being insecure. She even dared to say I was controlling because I asked where she was going. It was classic Jessica: deflect, deny, blame me for everything. I felt a mix of disgust and disgusted anger, realizing she was willing to lie to my face and make me doubt my own sanity. Honestly, at that moment, I wanted to explode. But I kept my cool, telling her that her lies weren't going to work anymore. I told her I was done playing her games and that I needed some time to think. She, of course, threw a fit, calling me all sorts of names, saying I was overreacting, that I was insecure, that she loved me but she deserved better. That last part really hit me hard. She said she was bored, that I was too controlling, that her cheating was just her way of getting some excitement. I was stunned. How could she sit there and justify cheating, especially during everything we'd been through? That night I didn't get any sleep either. My mind kept racing, going over everything she said and did. I felt like a fool. How had I missed all these signs? Why did I trust her so blindly? And most of all, how could she be so callous about everything? The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt just as much was knowing she saw me as some sort of obstacle, not someone she truly loved. I had no idea what to do next, but I knew one thing: this wasn't going to be easy to fix, if it could be fixed at all. Over the next few days, I was in a fog. I went from angry to hurt to just numb. I kept replaying everything in my head: her sneaking out, her lies, her dismissive attitude. It was like I'd been hit by a truck, and every time I thought I'd recovered a bit, something else would remind me of her betrayal. I started questioning everything about our relationship, wondering if I'd ever really known her at all. One night, I decided I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I needed to find out just how deep her lies went. I started digging through her stuff, looking for anything that could give me more proof or clarity. That's when I found the messages, dozens of them, on her phone from the guy she'd been sneaking around with. They weren't just friendly texts. There were explicit messages, pictures, even plans for their secret meetups. I felt sick reading them, like I'd been punched in the stomach all over again. How many times had they been together? How long had she been carrying on? I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. That discovery confirmed everything I suspected, but it also changed how I saw Jessica. This wasn't just some mistake or a moment of weakness. She'd been lying, sneaking, cheating for months. And she'd done it during the worst time of my life, her grandmother's funeral. I couldn't wrap my head around her callousness. How could she be that selfish, that manipulative? It made me realize I'd been living in some kind of denial, hoping she'd change, hoping she loved me enough to stop. But she didn't. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I was prepared. I called her, asked her to come over. When she showed up, I was already waiting, my hands trembling but my voice steady. I laid everything out on the table: the texts, the pictures, the times I'd caught her sneaking around. Her face twisted into a sneer and she started to lie again, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that she didn't mean for it to go this far, that it was just sex, that she needed something more. She didn't even bother to look ashamed. She just blamed me, said I was too controlling, that I'd pushed her away. I couldn't take it anymore. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I was done. Done with her lies, her cheating, her manipulation. I told her I was sick of her playing the victim and acting like I was the crazy one. I said I'd been loyal, faithful, and she'd thrown it all away. She got angry, yelled that I was overreacting, that she loved me but needed some excitement, that I was just insecure. Whatever. I was past caring about her excuses. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment, feeling a strange mix of relief and deep sadness. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to forget everything and try to move on. But another part knew that trust was broken beyond repair. I kept asking myself how I'd let someone betray me like that, how I hadn't seen the signs sooner. The pain was sharp, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this lie. I had to decide what came next. I felt like everything I'd believed in was shattered, and I was left picking up the pieces. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. Every waking moment was filled with memories of her, of the lies, and of the betrayal that cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind, so trusting. Jessica was manipulative, that much was clear now. She made herself the victim, spun her lies so convincingly that I had almost convinced myself I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew the truth: she had been cheating on me for months, probably longer, and during my grandmother's funeral no less. I tried to talk to friends, but I didn't want to burden anyone with the full story right away. Honestly, I felt ashamed, embarrassed even. How could I have been so stupid? I was furious at myself for not seeing the signs, for not stopping this before it got so out of control. The only thing I kept coming back to was the image of her sneaking off with that guy while I was crying at her grandmother's funeral, that moment when everything changed for me. I realized she had no respect for me, no regard for what I was feeling. That betrayal was worse than I could put into words. One thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't stay in the same place. I needed space, clarity. I packed a bag and went to stay with my brother for a while. I didn't tell him everything at first, just that I needed to get away and clear my head. It was the first time I allowed myself to really feel the pain without trying to mask it. I sat outside his house, staring at nothing, feeling every inch of the betrayal. It was like a punch to the gut every time I thought about how she lied to me, how she justified her cheating, how she dismissed my feelings as if they meant nothing. I kept thinking about the lies she told me, that she was just stressed, that she didn't mean for it to happen, that she loved me but needed something more. It was all bullshit. She knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't some mistake. It was calculated, planned, and executed while I was at my lowest. I'd never felt so disgusted with someone I loved. And what's worse, I started to question if I'd ever really known her. Was the Jessica I married even the same person? Or was I just fooling myself all these years? In those quiet moments, I began to realize something. I was done waiting for her to change or admit what she'd done. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had to decide what I wanted, whether to fight for the marriage or walk away for good. But even as I thought about that, I felt a strange sense of relief creeping in. As much as it hurt, I knew I was finally seeing her for what she really was. The woman I loved turned out to be someone I hardly recognized anymore, and honestly, I was tired of the lies, the manipulations, and the betrayal. I needed to decide if I was going to let her continue to hurt me or if I was finally going to take control of my life and move on. After a week of staying away, I knew I had to confront the reality of the situation head-on. Sitting in my brother's house, I kept circling back to one question: what do I do now? I felt angry, betrayed, exhausted, but also a strange kind of clarity was starting to settle in. I realized I could keep living in this limbo, half in, half out. I had to make a decision, one way or another. So I decided to give Jessica one last chance to come clean. I called her and told her I wanted to meet. I wasn't looking for another fight. I just needed her to be honest with me, and I told her that if she truly loved me, she'd tell me everything, no matter how bad it was. She agreed to come over that evening, and I could see that she was nervous, maybe even scared, probably because she knew I wasn't going to go easy on her. When she arrived, she tried her usual line of dismissiveness, acting like I was overreacting again. But I cut her off immediately. I told her I'd seen the messages, the photos, everything. I told her I knew she'd been cheating on me during my grandmother's funeral, a moment that was supposed to be about mourning and family, and instead, she was out sneaking around with some guy. Her face twisted, her eyes flashing with that bitchy glare she always had when she was about to lie her way out of something. She said I was paranoid, that she only went out that night because she was overwhelmed and needed some space. I didn't buy it. I told her I wasn't stupid. She finally broke down, started crying and saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean for it to go this far. She claimed she was just trying to feel alive again, that she was bored and stressed, and that sex with him was just a way to feel wanted. She looked me dead in the eyes and said she loved me, but she just needed something different. That was her excuse. She was bored, she was reckless, and she'd been caught up in some stupid affair. But I could see right through her. That bitchy facade. It was just her way of covering up the guilt and the truth she refused to admit. I was furious, but I stayed calm. I told her that her excuses didn't matter anymore, that her lies had broken whatever trust we had left. I told her I couldn't, and wouldn't, be with someone who could do something like this during one of the worst moments of my life. I told her I was done for good. I did. Want to hear any more lies, any more bullshit? I told her she needed to leave and not come back. She started yelling, throwing a fit, calling me controlling, insecure, saying I was overreacting, but I'd heard enough. I told her that her actions spoke for themselves, that I wasn't going to be a fool anymore, not for her, not for anyone. When she finally left, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with devastation. I had finally spoken my truth, and I knew I couldn't go back to that life. That night I sat alone, staring at the wall, feeling everything I'd kept bottled up for so long. The betrayal, the lies, the hurt, it all came crashing down. But underneath it all, I also felt a flicker of strength. I realized I'd been giving her power for too long, letting her manipulate my emotions. I was tired of feeling like a victim. It was time to rebuild, to heal, and to figure out what really mattered to me now. I didn't know what the future held, but I did know one thing. I deserved better than this. In the days that followed, I started to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The initial shock and rage gradually gave way to a quiet, determined resolve. I knew I couldn't change what Jessica had done, nor could I force her to be the person I thought she was. But I could decide what my future looked like. I moved out of the apartment we shared, found a new place, and began the slow process of rebuilding my sense of self. It wasn't easy. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of what I'd lost, of the betrayal that cut so deep. I learned to trust myself again, to listen to my gut, and to recognize the warning signs I'd ignored for too long. That whole experience taught me a brutal lesson about honesty, about respecting myself enough to walk away from someone who disrespects me in the worst way. I also realized how important it is to communicate openly and not let things fester. Because if I'd confronted her earlier, maybe I could have saved myself from all this pain. Most of all, I learned that revenge isn't about hurting the other person. It's about reclaiming your power and dignity. I didn't want to be with someone who could do what she did, and I knew I had to cut her out of my life completely. I don't hate Jessica, I just see her differently now, as someone who was never really my partner. She was a stranger in disguise, and I was too blinded by love to see it. Looking back, I'm grateful for the painful lessons. I don't hold on to anger anymore. Instead, I use it as fuel to move forward. I still feel the sting of her betrayal, but I also feel stronger than I did before. I know I'll be okay better because I've learned what I won't tolerate and what I deserve. I don't want anyone else to go through this kind of pain, but if you do, I can tell you this. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs and never let someone treat you like you're less than you are. Because in the end, your worth is what matters most.